Somewhere in an old recipe box, on index cards gone soft at the corners, on the margins of newspaper clippings folded twice over, in a grease-stained pocket of a cookbook with a broken spine, 35 recipes are quietly being forgotten. They were your great-grandmother's every day. Not her Sunday best, not her holiday showpiece. The plain, patient cooking she did on Tuesday afternoons while the radio played and the kettle ticked on the back of the stove. Here's what we can still save before the last person who remembers the smell of it closes her eyes for good. Pull up a chair, picture the kitchen first, because the recipes only make sense inside it. A cast iron skillet living permanently on the back burner. A stoneware crock for pickles, lid weighted with a river rock. A flour sifter that squeaked. A wooden spoon darkened at the handle from 40 years of stirring. A window over the sink with a row of empty jelly jars catching the light. And somewhere, tacked to the cupboard door, the handwriting. That loopy, forward-leaning cursive belonging to a generation who learned to write with a dip pen and never quite let go of the grace of it. Most of what we'll talk about came out of a woman's head, not a book. The books: Fanny Farmer's 1896 Boston Cooking School Cookbook, Marion Harlan's Common Sense in the Household from 1871, Mary Randolph's Virginia Housewife from 1824, Mary Lincoln's earlier Boston text, even the imported British sensibility of Mrs. Beeton. Those were references. But the cooking itself was memory. The tilt of a palm measuring salt, the look of batter when it was right, the sound butter made when the pan was hot enough. We lost that first. The recipes are just the footprints, so let's walk through them. 35 of them, grouped the way she would have grouped them herself, by the hour of the day, by the season, by what the pantry could still give. Breakfasts first, because the stove got lit before the sun did. She started with salt-rising bread, and this one is nearly gone. Not hard to find in a book, hard to find in a person. Salt-rising bread predates commercial yeast in Appalachian and pioneer kitchens, leavened by a wild, bacterial starter of cornmeal, milk, and a pinch of salt left overnight in a warm spot, trusting that the right microbes would wake up. The bread has a tangy, almost cheesy aroma some people love and some absolutely cannot abide. My great-aunt kept her starter warm in a bowl of hot water inside an oven with just the pilot light. The bread that came out had a dense, close crumb, a pale gold crust, and a toast that smelled faintly like the oldest good thing in the world. Then came the Johnny cake and its cousin, the hoe cake, and it's worth drawing the line between them because great-grandma did. A Johnny cake, properly speaking, is cornmeal mush spread thin on a hot griddle, a flatbread born in New England from the Wampanoag gift of corn. Rhode Island still argues about the correct thickness and whether the cornmeal should be whitecap flint. A hoe cake, down south, was the cruder cousin. Cornmeal and water and salt, cooked originally on the blade of a garden hoe held over coals in the field. Both are humble, both delicious with good stone-ground meal and butter that melts into the cracks. You'll eat them faster than you can stack them. Popovers were her little show-off. Eggs, flour, milk, salt, and nothing else. No leavening except the steam the eggs throw off inside a screaming hot popover pan. Done right, they climb out of the tin like something alive, crisp, and hollow and golden brown, and you crack them open and slather the inside with butter and strawberry preserves. Fanny Farmer's 1896 popover recipe is still within a whisper of the one I grew up with. Sunday breakfast, what she made when company came. The first thing I ever watched rise in an oven and believe in. Sally Lunn bread was her other quiet pride, an English brioche that crossed the Atlantic and settled deep in Virginia Tidewater kitchens. A tall, egg-rich, yeasted bread baked in a tube pan, the crumb so tender it pulls apart in silky strands. Mary Randolph wrote about it. Martha Washington probably ate it. And on a Sunday morning in 1912, a farm wife in Goochland County was slicing it warm and setting out apple butter beside it without a second thought. Let me stop a moment. There is a smell that used to live in American kitchens that is almost extinct now. The smell of apple butter cooking down to mahogany. It takes all day. A copper kettle, often outside over an open wood fire, because the sugar spatters and the heat is enormous. Peeled apples and cider. You stir and stir with a long wooden paddle, because if you stop, it scorches. Hours pass. The color deepens. Sun moves across the yard. Cinnamon and clove get added near the end. At sundown, you have a glossy, dark, almost black preserve the color of an old violin, sweet and tart and smoky from the wood fire. One woman did not do this alone. Neighbors came. It was a day, not a recipe. Let's finish breakfast. Southern spoon bread. Not quite a bread. Not quite. A pudding. A souffle-adjacent creation of cornmeal, eggs, milk, and butter baked in a deep dish until the top domes and the middle trembles. You eat it with a spoon, which is the whole point of the name. Mary Randolph's 1824 version is essentially the mother of every spoon bread recipe since. Served under a pool of melted butter, it makes a pot of ham and greens feel like a banquet. And Parker House rolls, born at Boston's Parker House Hotel in the 1870s, folded over themselves like a little envelope, brushed with butter before baking, pulled apart, still steaming at the supper table. The lard-flaked flake of a real Parker House roll, pulled in half while it's still too hot to hold, is one of the most honestly American things you will ever eat. Cream scones round out the morning, a lighter, richer cousin of the biscuit, made with heavy cream instead of buttermilk, currants folded in, wedges cut from a round of dough and baked until the tops are freckled gold. Scrapple is its own conversation. A Pennsylvania Dutch creation, born of the thrift principle that nothing from the hog gets wasted. Trimmings simmered, with cornmeal and buckwheat flour and sage and pepper poured into a loaf pan, chilled overnight, fried crisp in the morning. Crunchy outside, yielding inside. Savory and a little funky in the way peasant food is honest about itself. Eggs on top, maybe molasses, maybe ketchup. Pennsylvania farmers ate it before dawn, and it held them through a morning of hard work. Now let's move to the savory suppers, because the clock turns and the stove never cools. Chicken and dumplings first. She made this with a stewing hen, an old bird past her laying years, because stewing hens have flavor a supermarket broiler cannot dream of. Cut the hen, cover with water, add a halved onion, carrots, celery tops, salt. 2 hours until the meat falls from the bone. Pull the bones, skim the fat, drop in dumplings, rolled and cut like thick noodles, Pennsylvania style or pillowy spoonfuls, Southern style. What came to the table was a white gravy stew that could bring a grown man to tears. No cream of anything, no shortcut, just time. Beef and barley soup came out of the same patient instinct. A piece of chuck, or better yet a soup bone, begged off the butcher for almost nothing, simmered for 3 hours with onion, carrot, celery, tomato, a bay leaf, and pearl barley added for the last hour so it swelled but did not turn to mush. A lid went on. The whole house warmed. That was supper on a blue January evening when the windows rattled. Mulligatawny soup you might not expect in an American great-grandma's kitchen, but turn-of-the-century cookbooks were full of it, borrowed from British colonial India, softened for American tastes. Chicken broth, curry powder, apple, onion, rice, a little cream. Fanny Farmer had a version, Marion Harland had one. In 1907, it was the height of sophistication at a ladies' luncheon, spicy gentle, fragrant, golden in the bowl. Oyster stew was Christmas Eve, full stop. In the mid-Atlantic, New England, the Great Lakes cities where oysters arrived on ice from the coast, the night before Christmas meant a tureen of hot milk and cream, a stick of butter, a pint of shucked oysters, with their liquor, white pepper, paprika on top, oyster crackers floating. 12 minutes of cooking. Heat the oysters only until their edges just curl. The whole family in Sunday clothes, the candles lit. You ate it slowly because you knew it was the meal that marked the night. Cream of celery soup, from scratch, not a can. A head of celery, sweated slow in butter with an onion, simmered, in stock, pureed, thickened with a roux and cream, finished with white pepper and a scrape of nutmeg. Pale green, silky, the flavor of celery concentrated into something that tastes like the idea of a garden in late summer. When Campbell's came along in 1915 with their condensed version, they changed American cooking forever. But the from-scratch original is still the better soup. It is not close. Brunswick stew, down in Virginia and Georgia and the Carolinas, was originally a hunter's stew of squirrel and rabbit, later chicken and pork, simmered for hours with tomatoes, corn, lima beans, and potatoes. Every county has its argument about the correct ingredients. The one constant is the Carolina hot sauce tang of Brunswick stew, vinegar and pepper cutting through the long-cooked sweetness, keeping it bright on the tongue. A church supper, Brunswick stew made in a 40-gallon pot over an outdoor fire, is one of the great communal American dishes, and great-grandma's Saturday kitchen version was its quieter domestic cousin. Chicken a la king sounds old-fashioned because it is, and it deserves a rescue. Diced chicken, mushrooms, red and green pepper, in a cream sauce sharpened with a splash of sherry and a pinch of paprika, served over toast points or inside a puff pastry shell. Delmonico's in New York claimed to invent it in the 1890s. Foxhall Keene's father claimed it was his. Either way, by 1920, every hostess in America had a version, and your great-grandmother's version was probably faster and better than the restaurants, because she used real chicken broth and she did not skimp on the butter. A pause. She didn't shop the way we shop. Butcher on Tuesday, produce market on Thursday. A cellar with potatoes, onions, apples, winter squash, cabbage, carrots packed in damp sand, jars on shelves, peaches, tomatoes, pickles, beans, applesauce, jam, the summer put up against the winter. When she decided what to make for supper, she walked into that pantry and looked at what she had, and the decision made itself. The recipe was a response to the shelf. The shelf was a response to the garden. The garden was a response to the sun. Now, the vegetable side of the table, which is where a lot of modern cooks have truly lost the thread. Tomato pudding is a Midwestern secret that refuses to die. Stewed tomatoes, sugar, butter, and torn bread cubes, baked until the top is crisp and the bottom is nearly jammy. Sounds strange. Tastes like August in a casserole dish. Corn pudding, its cousin, is sweet corn cut off the cob, whisked with eggs and milk and a little sugar, baked in a water bath until set and custardy. Succotash, the Narragansett word the Pilgrims borrowed, is fresh corn and lima beans cooked together, sometimes with bacon, sometimes with cream, sometimes with nothing but butter and salt. 3 ingredients, 400 years, still good. Stewed tomatoes were an hour-long tradition, not a 10-minute sauté. Peeled, quartered, set in a heavy pot with butter, sugar, salt, and pepper. Maybe a piece of torn bread to soak up the liquor. Simmered covered an hour until the whole thing collapses, sweet and concentrated and glossy. Served on a side plate with Sunday roast, a vegetable and a sauce and a comfort all at once. Creamed onions, another lost art. Pearl or boiling onions peeled. Peeling. 20 is a meditation, not a chore. Blanched tender, simmered in a bechamel with nutmeg, served at Thanksgiving beside the turkey. Pale, mild, sweet. Glazed parsnips belong in the same conversation. Parboiled, finished in butter and brown sugar and a whisper of ginger until the outsides caramelize. Parsnips were a staple American winter vegetable for 300 years before we forgot them between 1955 and 1980. Sweeter than carrots, and they deserve their old seat at the table. A quick word about pickles. Great-grandma's shelf was half preserves and half pickles, and the pickles were not what is in the jar at the grocery store now. Bread and butter pickles, the original, were a specific creation of Omar and Cora Fanning in Illinois in the 1920s, who patented the name. Thin-sliced cucumbers, sweet onion, salt, sugar, vinegar, mustard seed, celery seed, turmeric. The original is crisper, less syrupy, more honest than anything you will find pre-jarred on a shelf today. Beet pickles, 7-day pickles, were a ceremony. You boiled the beets, slipped the skins, sliced them into a crock, poured over a brine of vinegar, sugar, and whole spices, and let them sit covered for 7 days in the cool pantry. What came out was magenta and sweet sour and glorious, and there is nothing quite like the pink puff of pickled beet juice staining the white enamel of a plate. Watermelon rind pickles, because nothing got wasted. The white part of the rind, peeled of its green, cubed, brined overnight, simmered in syrup spiced with cinnamon, clove, and lemon until translucent. Jewel-like in a jar, tasting like a summer that refused to end. Piccalilli is the chopped green tomato relish of the frost-killed garden. Green tomatoes, cabbage, onion, peppers, mustard seed, vinegar, sugar, cooked down bright. When the first frost came and the vines still had a bushel of stubborn green fruit, piccalilli was the answer. Corn relish is the August answer. Fresh kernels, red and green peppers, onion, vinegar, sugar, celery seed, turmeric, canned hot in pint jars to glow gold all winter. Apple butter we started to talk about. Pear butter is its quieter sister. Firm pears cooked down with sugar and a little lemon and sometimes ginger until the color turns from pale yellow to deep amber, and the spoon stands up in the pot. You canned it. You gave a jar to a neighbor with a ribbon around it. You opened that jar in February, and the kitchen smelled like last September. Let me shift again. The sweet side of the shelf deserves its own breath. Pawpaw pudding first, because the pawpaw is the great forgotten American fruit. It grows wild from the Ozarks to Appalachia to the Ohio River Valley. A custardy mango-banana tropical tasting thing that ripens in September and cannot be shipped because it bruises if you look at it. Grandmothers in Kentucky and Indiana knew exactly when the pawpaws were dropping and went out with baskets. A baked custard of pawpaw pulp, eggs, sugar, butter, flour, cinnamon, cream. It tastes like a fruit that was in America before America was. Persimmon bread is the same story with a different fruit. American persimmons, small, orange, astringent until a frost softens them, get mashed into a pulp and folded into a quick bread with pecans and sugar and spice. Hoosier cookbooks from the 1880s forward are full of persimmon pudding and persimmon bread variations. They taste like late autumn in Indiana, which is a taste that deserves to survive us. Now the pies. And let me confess, I could talk about pies for an hour. Shoofly pie is Pennsylvania Dutch, a molasses pie with a crumb topping named Folklore says because the sweet was so strong you had to shoo flies off the cooling pie. Wet bottom shoofly has a layer of gooey molasses at the base. Dry bottom has the molasses mixed into the crumb. Either way, it is dark, sticky, sweet, and served with black coffee that cuts it just right. Vinegar pie is a Depression-born survivor, older than the Depression, a custard pie made, with apple cider vinegar standing in for lemon because lemon was a luxury and vinegar was always in the pantry. It tastes astonishingly like lemon, like a lemon meringue pie that went to college and came back humble. Chess pie is the South's own. Eggs, sugar, butter, a little cornmeal to set it, a spoonful of vinegar to brighten it, vanilla. The name is an argument. Chess from chest because it kept in a pie chest, or jez pie slurred down, or from the English cheese pie. What matters is the thin crackle of the top, the yielding set of the middle. Buttermilk pie is its cousin. Tangier, creamier, shinier on top, no cornmeal. Both belong to the kind of Sunday supper where you eat pie and mean it. Cakes. Burnt sugar cake, a caramel cake where the sugar is actually burned, cooked dark amber in a dry pan until it nearly smokes, dissolved carefully in water to make a burnt sugar syrup, and folded into the batter so the whole cake tastes of caramel without a speck of frosting. A burnt sugar icing on top. A lost art from the 1910s and 1920s. Ginger cake with lemon sauce. A dark, molasses-rich, clove-scented gingerbread baked in a square pan and served warm with a yellow lemon sauce made from egg yolk, sugar, butter, and fresh lemon juice, thickened in a double boiler and poured over each slice. This was fall. This was a lit kitchen at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. This was coming in cold and being given a dish and a fork and told to sit down. Molasses stack cake is Appalachian, thin layers of molasses sweetened cake, sometimes 5, sometimes 7, sometimes 9, stacked with a filling of dried apples cooked down with sugar and spice. Legend says mountain brides would have one layer contributed by each neighbor at the wedding, and the height of the cake was a measure of how loved the couple was. It sits in the refrigerator for a day before you cut it, the layers softening into the apple filling until the whole thing becomes one dense, spiced, almost pudding-textured slice. It is the most quietly magnificent cake you will ever meet. And then Coca-Cola cake, because history includes what people actually ate, and by the 1930s, the Coca-Cola Company's home EC department in Atlanta was pushing recipes that baked the soda right into the batter. A chocolate sheet cake with Coke in both the cake and the icing, marshmallows folded in, pecans on top. Southern church cookbooks from 1938 onward are thick with variations. It is not ancient, it is not pure, but it is real. Americana, a recipe born of a company and adopted by grandmothers and passed down on index cards in blue ballpoint. It earned its place. Let me slow down again. Beverages. Sassafras tea first, the oldest American beverage on this list. Sassafras root bark, dug from the forest floor in early spring, rinsed, simmered until the liquid ran deep, rose red, sweetened with honey. It tastes like root beer because root beer tastes like it, not the other way around. The FDA restricted commercial saffrole in 1960, but traditional home teas are still made in Appalachia every spring by people who remember. The first tonic of the year, a blood thinner, a spring cleaner, a ritual. Switchel. If you do nothing else from this whole conversation, try Switchel. It is the haymaker's punch. Cider vinegar, molasses, powdered ginger, cold water. That's it. Farm hands drank it by the gallon during hay harvest in July because it was the smartest thing anyone ever figured out to keep a working body going in the heat. The vinegar replaces what sweat takes. The molasses gives a long, slow sugar. The ginger settles the stomach. It is tart and fiery. And earthy, and it will make you feel like your great-grandfather's patting you on the back and telling you to finish the South 40 before dark. Root beer float, sassafras and sarsaparilla, and wintergreen syrups, carbonated water, and a scoop of vanilla ice cream dropped in. The first root beer floats showed up in soda fountains in the 1890s, and by the 1910s, every drugstore counter in America had a brass soda spigot and a glass of foam sliding across a marble counter to a child in a pinafore. It was a nickel. It was a treat. It was America learning what a little sweetness in the middle of the week could do. Egg cream, a Brooklyn institution, contains no egg and no cream. Chocolate syrup, cold milk, seltzer shot hard from a pressurized siphon, stirred until the head is foamy and an inch thick. Ask a Brooklyn man how to make one, and he will argue about syrup brand and glass tilt for 20 minutes. That is the point. I've brought you through 35. Salt-rising bread, Johnny cakes, hoe cakes, popovers, Sally Lunn, spoon bread, Parker House rolls, cream scones, scrapple, chicken and dumplings, beef and barley, mulligatawny, oyster stew, cream of celery, Brunswick stew, chicken a la king, tomato pudding, corn pudding, succotash, stewed tomatoes, creamed onions, glazed parsnips, beet pickles, watermelon, rind pickles, bread and butter pickles, piccalilli, corn relish, apple butter, pear butter, pawpaw pudding, persimmon bread, shoe-fly pie, vinegar pie, chess pie, buttermilk pie, burnt sugar cake, ginger cake with lemon sauce, molasses stack cake, Coca-Cola cake, sassafras tea, switchel, root beer float, egg cream. If you counted more than 35, that's on purpose. Your great-grandmother's kitchen always had more than you thought. Here is what I want to leave you with. These recipes are not museum pieces. They are not relics to be admired behind glass. They survived because somebody wrote them down, and they will only keep surviving if somebody keeps cooking them. James Villas, who spent his life recording Southern traditions before they slipped away, used, "To say that a recipe is a living thing, it exists in the making, not in the writing. The writing is just instructions for resurrection." So here is my invitation. Pick one, just one. The one your eyes kept catching on while I talked. Maybe it's the chess pie because your grandmother had chickens. Maybe it's the switchel because you work outside. Maybe it's the oyster stew because someone in your family used to make it for Christmas Eve, and you haven't tasted it in 20 years. Pick that one. Make it for someone you love. Feed them slowly. Tell them where it came from, even if all you know is that a woman 100 years ago stood at a stove and stirred it for an hour because it was what she had to give. Then do one more thing. Find a clean index card. Write the recipe out in your own handwriting, the loopy, careless cursive you stopped using when you learned to type. Write the name at the top. Write the date at the bottom. Tuck it into the back of your cookbook, or into a recipe box, or inside the cover of whatever book you read most. Because someday a grandchild you have not met yet is going to open that book and find that card, and they are going to hold a piece of paper you touched, and they are going to cook the thing you cooked. And the smell that comes up out of the pot is going to be the same smell that filled your kitchen on the afternoon you first tried it. That is how these recipes stayed alive for 200 years. One index card, one loved mouth, one Tuesday afternoon at a time. The chain doesn't break unless we let it, so don't let it. Pick one. Make it. Write it down. Pass it on.